I transmigrated into a tragic romance novel and fell in love with the vicious villain, but he was in love with the protagonist, a love that was unrequited. So I forced him, imprisoned him, controlled him. I didn't get his love, only a bottomless well of his hatred. When I finally decided to die, I asked him, "What do you think of me?" Julian Rhodes didn't even look up. "Disgusting," I said. "Say one nice thing and I'll let you go. If I could do it all over, I would make sure I never met you." He spoke each word slowly, his gaze fixed on the book in his hands. I couldn't help but mutter, "I'm going to go tell the old you on you." He finally looked up at me, his eyes as cold as ice. "Are you going to live in the past your entire life?" Chapter 1. I had expected him to say something hurtful, but when he actually looked at me and said it, a lump still formed in my throat. My stomach twisted into knots, sending waves of pain through me, as if the entire world were collapsing. Humans possess the most sophisticated systems of language, yet I had no idea how to respond to his words. After all, I was the one who had forced this from the very beginning. I wanted so badly to say that he wasn't like this before. The Julian from before would smile gently at me, would stand by my side unconditionally, would love me forever. But the day the novel's plot arrived, he began to change. I couldn't bear to let him become the vicious villain with a miserable end, so I used every method I could, no matter how despicable, to keep him trapped by my side. And now, the plot was reaching its conclusion. The main couple had confessed their feelings and were happily married. To force him to face reality, I had shown him a live stream of their wedding. The young man's eyes were fixed on the two protagonists in the video, his hand gripping the pages of his book so tightly his knuckles were white. He just sat there, perfectly still. Even after I turned off the television, he didn't react at all. I sat with him late into the night. He finally spoke. "Are you satisfied now? You can let me go, can't you?" His voice was faint. I shifted my numb legs, saying nothing. My mind was a complete mess. I no longer had any reason to keep him imprisoned. But that was fine. I had to go die anyway. "All right," I said, taking a deep breath and forcing out the farewell. "I promise you stay, I'll go." My answer was met with silence. He had already lowered his head back to his book, showing no reaction to my words. The wind blew raindrops in through the window, lifting the corner of his shirt to reveal a waist that had grown thin. After all this time, I had failed to put any weight on him. I was a failure. He was free now. He should be able to take care of himself. "I'm leaving, Julian," I said again, louder this time. The hand turning the page paused for a fraction of a second. The only reply was the sound of the wind and that dim, hazy silhouette shrouded in indifference. Chapter 2. I am a transmigrator. Julian Rhodes and I grew up together. He was practically my older brother. My memories only awakened when I was 17. It was then I realized I wasn't from this world, but had transmigrated here after an accidental death. But the awakening came too late. I had already fallen in love with Julian. He was such a good person. When my parents died, he sent me a single message, "Wait for me," before crossing half the globe, arriving travel worn at my side to help me handle everything. I was grateful this was a BL novel, where same-sex love was commonplace. But I hated that Julian was the vicious villain of this novel, which detailed how deeply he loved the protagonist to the point of near devotion. It was like being told the exact time of your death. Every step toward that moment was torture. Back then, I was confident. I thought if I could just keep Julian from falling for the protagonist and then pestered him relentlessly, his thin skin would eventually give in and I'd win him over. But I never imagined the power of the plot would be so strong. He was destined to meet the protagonist. I managed to prevent their meeting at school, only for them to run into each other on the street. And then Julian would inevitably fall in love with him. It was like fate. Until one night, he was drinking his sorrows away at a bar and said to me with a bitter smile, "What do I do? I want to kill that guy and snatch Owen Wen for myself." The acrid smell of alcohol stung my nose. It burned my throat and eyes. I knew the guy Julian was talking about was the main love interest. I realized I couldn't delay any longer. Even if not for my own sake, then for the peace of society, I had to do something. Even if he hated me, even if we became enemies, I had to stop this from happening. Chapter 3. My plan took a year to prepare. After the plot began, Julian's emotions became unstable. He was irritable, quick to anger, impulsive, and prone to hurting people. I got my license as a psychological therapist and forged a diagnosis. Using his mental health as a reason, I brought him to this scenic city by the mountains and to recuperate for 2 years. His family was relieved. After all, we had grown up together. He hated me. He wouldn't let me near him. In the beginning, he fought back constantly, so I would beat him, my face a blank mask. We fought. We hurled the most vicious curses at each other. I drugged him. Even though he was 3 years older and taller than me, he was no match for me. Expressionless, I forced his head into the water, pulling him up by his hair just as he was about to break. I made him look at himself in the mirror. Look at what you've become. You degrade yourself, so don't hate me for degrading you. You don't care anyway. You're enjoying this. The young man's clouded eyes stared into the mirror. His dark hair clung to him like water snakes, his pale face marked with several cuts, dotted with blood. He stared blankly at the mirror, then slowly reached out a fingertip to touch its surface. The once radiant and noble young man had been tormented by the plot into this ghostly figure. Seeing his expression, I knew his sanity had returned. I suppressed the ache in my heart, let go of his hair, and said coldly, "There's food outside. If you don't want to eat, throw it out." With that, I got up and left first. I didn't want him to see my trembling hands. In this struggle I could not lose. Leo lay. It was the first time in so long that he had said my name. I stopped. "I hate you." The well-mannered young man couldn't bring himself to say anything truly foul, but the words were like 1,000 arrows piercing my heart. I didn't turn back. I took a deep breath to calm myself, trying to keep my voice from shaking as I whispered, "I know." As I left the bathroom, I thought I felt a faint tug on the corner of my shirt, as if trying to stop me from leaving. Like a dream or an illusion, I glanced down. There was nothing. Chapter 4. Julian, he was a gentle person. It was only when faced with someone he disliked that his heart became exceptionally hard. I learned that well during the years I tormented him. But on nights with raging storms, he would seem dazed and subconsciously knock on my door. Because I was afraid of thunder. The night my parents died was a night just like that. It became my trauma, so he would come and sleep with me. Even now that we were enemies, he would still subconsciously seek me out. But the moment he saw my face, he would snap back to reality, a look of pain crossing his features. He couldn't believe that the little brother he had always protected would harbor such feelings for him, and would, in turn, imprison him. I didn't want to see him in pain. So on rainy nights, I stopped staying at home. I had planned to continue tormenting each other like this, but seeing his pain made my own heart ache. It was at that moment that a system's voice sounded in my ear. It said it had run out of energy and had fallen into a deep sleep right after I transmigrated. Now, it had just woken up to find the story was already at its end. If you leave, I can release the villain from the plot's control and erase this period from his memory. He won't be in pain anymore. The system sounded a little troubled. After all, you ended up in the wrong world. It was my mistake. To compensate you, once this character's life ends, you can return to your original world. I was stunned for a moment, only managing to hear. He won't be in pain, of course not. Fine, I agree. Chapter 5. I never expected that the auspicious day I had chosen for my departure would be met with a sudden violent downpour. I was slightly vexed. The curtain of rain made the whole city look gloomy. Thunder rolled through the dark clouds, making my heart pound. I was so consumed by grief that I forgot to bring an umbrella, but I didn't want to go back for it. I was afraid that if I saw him one more time, I wouldn't want to die anymore. I'd rather he just kept hating me, entangled with me until death. After a moment's hesitation, I called a cab. The car couldn't enter the residential complex, so I had no choice but to step out into the rain. Faintly, I thought I heard someone calling my name. Julian, impossible. I didn't turn back. Host, how would you like to die? Drowning, burning, or something else? Isn't there a less painful and more dignified way? I'll go get you a pill that shuts off all 5 senses. Give me a moment. Okay. I walked forward, and the rain was left behind me. Chapter 6. Watching the young man walk away, Julian stood there, looking blankly at the umbrella in his hand. He didn't know why he had chased after him. Was it because the rain was so heavy today? Or was it that final, farewell-tinged Julian he had called out? He wasn't sure, but his heart was still pounding, making him restless. Why was it like this? In just a few hours he would be back. Julian lowered his gaze. The damp air seemed to make moss grow in his lungs, his breathing growing painful. His mind felt like it was being torn apart, 2 conflicting thoughts battling within him. He hates Leo Lee. He loves Leo Lee. What he said today was too harsh. Leo Lee deserved it. He should apologize when he gets back. Why should he apologize for being imprisoned and tormented? He clutched his head in pain. As time passed, the mental brand seemed to loosen. The stone named hate was slowly being pushed aside by the love that was bubbling up. Righteous, open hatred allowed him to act without empathy, without considering the consequences. But love was different. The vortex would drag him into an abyss of pain during his moments of clarity. The thorns that had been growing in the dark were now strong enough to pierce his own heart. He shouldn't have done that. The cold wind cleared his head a little. He calmed down, his newly controlled mind finally beginning to think, I'm sick, aren't I? When is Leo coming back? Like always, he'll come back from a hotel. Will he be scared? He must be terrified of stormy nights like this. Where is he going? Who is he meeting? He belatedly realized that on stormy nights, Leo no longer stayed with him. Julian stumbled upstairs. He had to text Leo. He had to make Leo come back. Will Leo come back? Leo will come back. Chapter 7. I stood by the riverbank and lit a cigarette. The cold wind and chilling rain whipped through my hair. As far as I could see, the world was gray and oppressive, without a single speck of light, feeling like the end of days. At the end of my life, I felt a long-lost sense of relief. The system gave me the pill to block my senses. I studied it. That must be rain dripping from my eyelashes. How are you going to make sure he feels no pain? I asked suddenly. The story is over and the plot's control is weakening. I will gradually erase the memories of him and those around him. I sneered. And why should I believe you? You can witness his entire life before you return to your original world. I said, deal. I stubbed out the cigarette but didn't take the pill. I just jumped. The pain made me feel lucid. It made me feel profoundly that I was alive in this moment. My eardrums throbbed as water forced its way into my ears and nose, flooding my lungs. The sharp pain and suffocating feeling gradually blurred my consciousness. My phone seemed to vibrate. Someone was actually sending me a message. Was it Julian's parents? Whatever. Julian was free now. He could explain everything later. I had clearly closed my eyes. It must have been my life flashing before me. I saw Julian's tear-filled eyes. This was the first day of my death, Chapter 8. I really wanted to erase my existence from Julian's mind immediately, but the system said the plot's power still lingered, and it could only overwrite his memories gradually. Feeling melancholic, I reached for a cigarette only to grasp at empty air. I forgot I was a spirit now. My gaze fell on the young man who was still sitting there, reading a book. It was almost laughable. Only after I died did I dare to look at him with eyes full of love and pity. There were dark circles under his eyes. He hadn't been sleeping well for a while. He had lost so much weight, held up only by his height. Back then I was worried sick, but helpless. The only way I knew was the crude one, picking a fight with him. Once he was physically exhausted, he would fall asleep more easily. Tusk, thinking about it now, my intentions were truly good. The rain outside was still heavy. The wall clock showed it was already 10 o'clock, time for Julian to go to bed, yet he remained seated reading. His phone was on the coffee table, placed neatly, as if waiting for something. I walked over. The screen was dark. It was the phone I had bought for him years ago. It had no internet access and could only be used for two-way contact with me. In the end, it was barely used. It was always me calling him, and him not answering. Why was it sitting here now? Was he planning to gather all my things and throw them away? Sigh, I shook my head with a bitter smile. This is life. This is what happens when you force someone who doesn't love you. A bitter tree bears bitter fruit. You can't force love. I just stayed with him quietly until the clock struck 12. Julian finally moved. Time for bed, I guess. I breathed a sigh of relief. He looked up, glanced once more at the still dark phone. After a moment he stood up, returned the book to the shelf, and headed toward his bedroom. I followed him. When he reached his door, he paused, then turned back to the living room. To my confusion, he picked up the phone and walked into his bedroom. I followed him in. While he showered, I lay on the bed. At this moment, I couldn't help but think that being a ghost was actually pretty good. The sound of the shower stopped. He came out, wearing pajamas. He had hastily towel-dried his hair and was about to lie down. You should at least dry your hair properly, or you'll get a headache, I said, exasperated. After speaking, I realized he couldn't hear me at all. Oh, right, I was dead. He lay on the bed, staring blankly at the ceiling. Then he got up and went to get the hairdryer. I sat up too, resting my chin in my hands, smiling as I watched him dry his hair. Well, he still had some sense. At least he remembered what I said. That put my mind at ease a little. As he turned off the light, he glanced at his phone again, his lips pressed into a tight line. He was unhappy. I was completely baffled. That phone only had my contact information. Had he forgotten that? I had already charged his own phone and left it in my room. He should find it in a few days. I carefully snuggled into the crook of his arm and closed my eyes in contentment. Chapter 9. Julian woke up early. When I came to, the bed beside me was already empty. I've always been one to sleep in. I instinctively looked at the table. The phone wasn't there either. I frowned slightly and got up to follow him. The young man was standing at the front door, lost in thought. His hand clutched the phone tightly, and if you looked closely, you could see it was trembling slightly. Julian carefully placed his hand on the door, then instinctively pulled it away. "Open it, Julian." "You're free." I watched this scene with my arms crossed, speaking in an encouraging tone even though he couldn't hear me. The young man's handsome face was dotted with confusion and a complex emotion I couldn't decipher. I waited patiently until he finally placed his hand on the doorknob. He turned it, the door opened easily, so he hadn't locked it last night. "That's dangerous. You can't do that when I'm not around anymore," I chided, a little worried. Outside was the staircase. At the turn of the stairs, there was a window. It wasn't raining anymore, but the sky was still overcast. I took a deep breath. The air was quite fresh. I followed him out the door. I watched his stunned expression. I smiled and teased, "Doesn't freedom feel great?" The young man snapped back to his senses, but then retreated back into the apartment as if he'd been burned. He glanced at the phone again. Then, he closed the door and sat on the sofa. He pressed the power button to light up the screen, did nothing, let it go dark, then lit it up again. Over and over. I leaned in to look. The screensaver was still the one I had set. Sigh. Just then, I heard Julian's phone ring. Who was calling him? Julian heard it too. He stood up and walked toward the sound. It was coming from my room. He hesitated for a moment, then pushed open the door. Chapter 10. My room was quite clean, with few traces of life. The only personal touch was probably the stuffed toy we had named Belle. It was a gift from Julian when we were kids. He had mentioned the toy once when he was having one of his episodes. Furious, I had sneered that I'd thrown it away long ago. "You find me disgusting, don't you?" "Shouldn't you be happy that I threw it away?" He had stopped struggling then. After that ordeal, his face was wet with water as he told me he hated me. His eyes were a little red. Anyone who didn't know better would have thought he was crying, but I knew his heart was hard as stone. He never mentioned it again, and neither did I. We just tacitly moved on. Julian stared at the toy for a long time. He didn't even notice when the phone stopped ringing. He carefully picked up the little bear. I had taken good care of Belle. Even after all this time, it hadn't yellowed and was still clean and neat. He sat on the edge of the bed, holding the toy for a long time, as if in a daze, but the phone rang again. He noticed his own phone on the nightstand. The caller ID said Mom. He hesitated for a moment before answering. "Julian?" "Yes, Mom." Julian's voice was a little hoarse, with a nasal tone. "Leo said a few days ago that you were all better." I was still a bit skeptical, but my goodness, you sound like a person again. "You have to treat Leo well, you know. He's been running around taking care of you for over a year." I thought Julian would tell his mother about my vicious deeds. But he was silent for a moment before just saying, "Oh, by the way, the police just called me. Something about Leo's phone." I couldn't quite understand their dialect. "Why don't you go to the police station and see if Leo lost his phone?" And something about a body. Someone found it and took it to the police station. Okay. For some reason, I felt the tension in his muscles instantly relax. The young man nodded. I had a bad feeling. "My body couldn't have been found this quickly, could it? Maybe you shouldn't go, there's no point," I said, trying to stop him. But obviously it was useless. The young man picked out some clothes and hurried out. I sighed. All right, it was only a matter of time before he found out I was dead. Chapter 11. The young man who had been imprisoned for so long had not lost his ability to survive. He called a cab and went to the local police station. I rarely came to this place. Following Julian inside, I found it was bustling with activity. 2 old men were lying on the floor arguing, while a young-faced police officer stood between them, listening to their tirade with a completely blank, zoned-out expression. "Hello," Julian walked up to the officer. "I'm here to find Leo Lee. I'm here to take him home." What? The officer snapped out of his trance, rubbing his ears and shouting, "Who are you looking for?" "Leo Lee," Julian repeated. The young officer frowned and called towards the back. "Officer Jensen." "Yeah." A young man walked out from the back. He had sharp features and a righteous air, looking like a model, except for the dark circles under his eyes, which were a bit frightening. "What's up?" he asked. The young officer pointed at Julian. "He says we called him to come find Leo Lee." Hiss. "Oh, you must be the victim's family. I'm Officer Chris Jensen from the Linling District, Jinhua Road Station." He introduced himself while extending a hand. "The medical examiner has confirmed it, ruling out accident or homicide. He had a phone on him with 3 contacts. Only one, a woman, answered." The last bit of color drained from Julian's face at Officer Jensen's words. He turned deathly pale. I didn't know what he was thinking. I just heard Julian say, could there be a mistake? Someone must have stolen Leo's phone. My mom just called me and told me to come pick up Leo's phone. Chris Jensen's hand hung in midair. He didn't seem embarrassed, calmly retracting his hand. He must have been through this many times before. We've already confirmed it through technical means. The body wasn't in the water for long before it was hooked by an angler on the riverbank. The facial features are very clear. You can go take a look first. With that, he made a please gesture and led Julian away from the noisy reception hall. The medical examiner said the deceased didn't struggle much. We also checked the surveillance footage. We confirmed he smoked a cigarette by the river and then jumped. He was determined to die. Please accept my condolences. In the cold morgue, a single body lay on a slab, covered by a white sheet, looking at my own corpse. The feeling was rather strange. I circled the white sheet, my fingers passing through it. Impatiently, I urged the still frozen Julian. What are you waiting for? Hurry up and lift it. This is your second piece of great news for the day. The first was gaining his freedom. The second was the death of the person he hated most. If it were me, I'd probably play "Today is a Good Day" at the funeral. But looking at Julian's reaction, I fell into a suspicious silence. His hand, resting on the white sheet, was trembling. Chapter 12. Was his death painful? Julian asked, his voice hoarse. Officer Jensen rubbed his chin, seemingly trying to find some tactful words of comfort. Well, from a professional standpoint, it was pretty painful. Water fills your nose, ears, and mouth. You instinctively struggle, and then you die in the agony of suffocation and your lungs feeling like they're about to explode. It's honestly pretty tragic. Me. This Officer Jensen was quite the chatterbox. And a brutally honest one at that. But hearing about my painful death should make Julian happy, right? That's what I thought. But seeing the young man's ashen face, I wasn't so sure anymore. What did this mean? Sorry about that, my mouth runs a bit fast. Don't take it to heart. The person's dead. Who knows if it was painful or not, Chris Jensen said, his emotional intelligence kicking in just a moment too late. Even though neither of them could hear me, I couldn't help but say, you should really talk less. Officer Jensen, here's the phone. The young officer came in and handed a file bag to Chris. Chris said even though it was submerged, this phone has great waterproofing. It still works fine. I thought you looked familiar earlier because the phone's wallpaper is a picture of you two, though you looked a bit younger, so I didn't confirm the identity right away. Hurry up and lift the sheet to confirm. If you have no issues with the cause of death, you can sign the papers and take the body. If you do, we'll need to contact the medical examiner for an autopsy. Officer Jensen handed the items to Julian. Julian paused, his dark eyes shifting to the body on the slab. He gritted his teeth and said, that's not him. I stood by the corpse and sighed softly. What on earth are you thinking, Chris Jensen? Chris Jensen. If my 20/20 vision isn't failing me, and ruling out the possibility that you have superpowers, you haven't actually lifted the sheet to confirm the identity of the deceased. And does closing your eyes and refusing to face reality make it not happen? With that, he strode forward and briskly uncovered the body. A cop's a cop, after all. Chris Jensen, don't thank me, I'm just a helpful guy. Me. And I finally saw my own dead body. Eyes shut tight, lips pale, face swollen, hair still wet. It was obvious I had just been pulled from the water. My features hadn't changed much, so I was instantly recognizable. Take a look, what's done is done. My condolences, Chris said, pointing at me. Even though he wasn't wrong, for some reason, my fists were itching. My mouth twitched. I wanted a cigarette again. Julian took a few steps forward, his straight shoulders slumping as if all the strength had been drained from him. His heavy gaze scanned from my forehead down. He reached out, his pale fingertips lightly touching the small mole at the corner of my lips, then snatched his hand back as if burned, looking dazed. I let out a soft tusk. It was tiny and not very noticeable. You could basically only see it when I smiled. I never thought he would know about it. His lips and face were completely bloodless, making his pupils seem even darker and his skin even paler. Only the rims of his eyes were a moist red. Compared to my corpse lying there, he looked more like the lifeless one. I studied the devastated young man, vaguely feeling something inside him slowly crumbling. His face showed none of the joy of revenge, none of the elation of freedom. Only deep, profound grief. Just one look at him and my own heart ached with a dull pain. It shouldn't be like this. Julian, you should be happy, cheerful, relieved. From today on, there will be no one named Leo Lai in your life. No one will imprison you, beat you, abuse you. You will have a bright future ahead of you, and you won't meet the end described in the novel. But why are you wearing such an expression? Confirmed, it's him. I'm taking him home. But before that, can you give me some time alone with him? Julian said softly. Chapter 13. The young officer, Chris Jensen, and I stood outside. Sir, according to regulations, we shouldn't leave the family member alone in there. Regulations are rigid, people are flexible, Chris shrugged. After all, that was his lover. Lover, both the young officer and I exclaimed in shock. Can't you tell from the phone's wallpaper? The affection in their eyes is so thick you could cut it with a knife. But they're both men. Young man, you're a bit too old-fashioned, Chris said, wagging his finger. Come on, those two old guys are much harder to deal with than a widower. Watching them walk away, I sighed again, my mind drifting. There were times after Julian's episodes when he would dazedly murmur my name, ending with a very quiet, I love you. Back then, he would glance at me cautiously. I pretended not to hear, only then would he seem to relax. Because he was controlled by the plot, I could never really tell when he was lucid. So, I had always dismissed it as the ravings of a man driven mad by torment. Passing through the closed door, I found Julian sitting beside the bed, staring unblinkingly at my corpse. I leaned against the wall, watching him. The scene reminded me of that afternoon just a few days ago, when I made Julian watch the wedding. But what should have been a joyous event was, for him, a sorrowful one. My death should also make him happy, although his current expression didn't seem to have anything to do with happiness. Why? Is it because the one who died was your once closest brother? Because I'm dead, all the pain I brought you is buried, and you've started to remember my past kindness. And so pity comes flooding in. I don't need pity. Everything I did because I wanted to, because I had to. Even if I lost everything, I don't regret it. Even if the fruit it bore was bitter, I accepted it willingly. I moved closer to look at him. The statue that was Julian suddenly moved. He whispered, Leo, it's time to wake up. I snuck out. You should be angry now. If you don't lock me up again, I'm going to run away. I won't struggle this time, okay? Even as a spirit, my nose stung. It had been so long since I'd heard Julian speak like this. Back then, before the plot started, he was still a gentle young man, a very good brother to me. An argument once led us into a cold war. He couldn't sleep that night and finally gave in, sending me a text. I was still angry and ignored him, so he came to my door, knocked softly, and apologized in a tiny voice. He said I hadn't spoken to him all day, but I was with my senior. As he spoke, he almost talked himself into tears. I flung the door open, silent, and pulled him into a tight hug. After a long time, I said in a helpless tone, I don't like him, I only like you. Chapter 14. Chris Jensen was indeed a warm-hearted person. Seeing that Julian intended to take my body home, and probably out of respect for the dead, he offered to give Julian a ride. To avoid making his colleagues uncomfortable, he didn't take the police car, but his own. A spacious Land Rover, which funeral home, to my house, please. The young police officer raised an eyebrow. It's not that hot right now, but it's not the dead of winter either. I wouldn't recommend taking a body home. I'll buy a refrigerated casket. A refrigerated casket is fine, Chris nodded, then muttered under his breath, but necrophilia is not. Julian, whether he heard or not, just lowered his gaze to my body in his arms and said softly, in a few days when Mom and Dad come to see him one last time. I don't know why he took his own life, but my condolences. He didn't speak, silent as a shadow. The rest of the drive was long. I sat beside him, one hand hovering over his tightly clenched one. Ever since the plot began, we had never held hands like this. I could almost feel the warmth of his hand. On that stormy night when my parents died, I felt my world go dark. But he appeared out of the night, travel-worn, and gave me a firm, warm hug. And so, the rainy season of my life ended. But then came Julian's rainy season. Controlled by the damned plot, he mindlessly became a catalyst for the main character's romance. When the storm came, I knew this time I had to be the one to stand in front of him. It's all my fault. As he got out of the car, Julian said, I shouldn't have said that. Then Leo wouldn't have killed himself. I'm the one who should have died. Chris Jensen said nothing, watching Julian leave with a complicated expression. He then made a call. Hey, Chief. I think we're about to have another high-risk individual in our jurisdiction. Chapter 15. He carried me back home. He locked the door from the inside and then added 2 more locks, just like I used to do when I was home. The young man took a deep breath, looked down at my corpse, and said in a negotiating tone, I'll take you for a bath, okay, Leo? Me. Dude, this is my corpse. If it could talk, that would be a real ghost story. He took me to the bathroom to wash me. My body was already growing stiff, but he was still very patient, slowly washing away the grime. After drying me off, he helped me put on clean clothes. He sat there, letting me lean on his shoulder, and continued to read his book. He seemed to be reading quite intently. The scene had a bizarrely warm quality. "I don't hate you at all, actually. I was sick. I knew it, you knew it." My mind suddenly became unclear. Julian didn't look at me, his eyes fixed on the book as he spoke abruptly. The first words seemed difficult. But after he stumbled through the first sentence, each subsequent one became smoother, the sentences fragmented, as if he were desperate to get them out, no longer caring about logic or order. It was like I was possessed. Back then, the image of Owen Wen was like a brand on my mind, unbreakable. I was supposed to hate you, to despise you, and I did, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. A few times, my head felt like it was being stabbed with needles. I'd suddenly think I shouldn't be doing this, and when I looked up at the mirror, I'd see you looking at me with disappointment. I wanted to say I was fighting it, but my actions were right there. I did those things, no one else. I didn't dare to look you in the eye. I couldn't deny it. I was afraid my madness was wearing away your love, that if I confessed my disgusting love in a moment of clarity, it would only make you leave faster. I've never hurt anyone in my life, never done anything bad, yet this is the fate I get. Why did the world do this to me? I hate it so much. Why did this happen? I'm useless. I can't control myself, and I couldn't protect you. I'm sorry, I shouldn't have said that. If I hadn't, would you not have killed yourself? I'm the one who should be dead. Even his crying was silent, tears just streaming down his cheeks. My fingertips passed through his face. Now I couldn't even wipe his tears away. "Look forward," I said softly. "Even if you hadn't said that to me, I was still going to die. Damn this story, but you escaped the plot. You didn't die like the vicious villain." That's good enough. Chapter 16. I stayed with Julian at home for 3 days. He didn't eat, just lay there holding me. He didn't notify his parents, nor did he show any intention of arranging for my burial. I was getting anxious. He finally moved, getting up from the bed. He went to my room. My room was empty. He looked around, then gathered all my clothes and brought them to his own room. And Belle, too. He placed Belle carefully on the pillow beside him. "I have to take care of something. You sleep a little longer, okay? That's right, people have to move forward. You can't just stop because someone dies, right?" I nodded in relief, naturally ignoring his somewhat bizarre behavior. He slowly made his way to the bathroom. I thought he was just going to take a shower, so I waited outside. After a while, I realized something was wrong. The sound of water had stopped some time ago. My heart tightened and I rushed in. The scene was a nightmare. He was in the tub, the water stained a horrifying crimson. With his eyes peacefully closed, he had tried to end his life. The sight was shocking. "Are you insane, Julian? Did I save your life just so you could throw it away like this? Wake up and get yourself to a hospital, damn it," I roared. "System, where's the system? Get out here, is this how you erase someone's memories?" The system's voice, which had been absent for a long time, faintly sounded. "Don't worry, he won't die." Just then there was a knock on the door. "Mr. Rhodes, is anyone home? Officer Jensen, maybe he went out. I checked the community's entry logs when I came in. He hasn't left." Then Chris Jensen picked the lock with a wire, unable to resist praising himself. "Your Officer Jensen's skills haven't gotten rusty." Suddenly, his brow furrowed as he smelled the blood in the air. The young officer scanned the surroundings and immediately rushed toward the bathroom. I knew this would happen. Chapter 17. I followed Chris Jensen to the hospital. After emergency treatment, Julian's vital signs stabilized. Chris looked at the ashen-faced young man and spoke earnestly. "You were the only thing connecting him to this world. A person dies twice. First, the death of the body, and second, when no one remembers them anymore. Think about it. Would he really want you to die like this?" Julian didn't even move his eyes, just nodded slightly. "He would, Chris Jensen. This idiot." I was furious, cursing as I asked the system, "Can you just erase his memories now?" Because he was under the plot's control for so long and was also resisting it, he's become immune. I can't do it. Me, what good is this broken system? I'm filing a complaint right now. I can offer you something else. Forget it. I'm filing the complaint now. As a spirit, I could now see things I couldn't before, like the system's complaint option. "Dear customer, please hear me out first." The system suddenly sounded anxious. "Me, speak. Your soul will immediately return to your original world. This world will be forced to restart after this story concludes. Next time, it will not be controlled by the plot. He will not meet the main characters and will live a peaceful and happy life. You will also receive a compensation of 5 million in cash." I frowned slightly. "You're unreliable. Can you just end this world now?" "I'm sorry, dear. Once a story begins, it must be fully completed before this world can be restarted. But don't worry, you can enter that world to check on him at any time. I will also keep the complaint window open for you. How does that sound? But you must leave now. I need to clean everything up before this world closes, and your soul does not belong here. I pressed my lips together, unable to bear looking at the young man's grieving face any longer. Deal. The system's countdown began in my ear. I took a deep breath. I leaned close to Julian and whispered, "Then I have to go back first." Be happy, Julian, even though he couldn't hear me. With my life, I had gambled for a brand new tomorrow for him. He seemed to hear my confession. He looked dazedly in the direction of my spirit form, his eyes widening first in joy, then abruptly shifting to anxiety and sorrow. "You're leaving. Where are you going? Take me with you, please. If I die, can I go with you? Please, I'm begging you, take me with you. I'm sorry. I love you." In my final moments of leaving, I heard the words I had once longed to hear most, but I would rather he didn't love me, then his pain would be so much less. I opened my mouth. What should I say, now that we were face to face again? I didn't know where to begin. A dislocation in time had brought me to a place I shouldn't have been, leading to a relationship that should never have begun. I thought I should smile, but my face felt frozen. I said, "I know." "You've said it before, you just don't remember." There was so much he didn't remember. If the plot hadn't started, he was going to confess to me. He had prepared so many things, thinking he was being seamless, but I saw it all, pretending not to know, counting down the days. But when the plot began, everything was automatically corrected, his memories erased, those surprises turning into phantom bubbles in an instant. Against a power higher than this world, we were helpless. I said, "Live a good life. Only if you live peacefully to the end of your days will I come back to get you. Otherwise, we'll never meet again. You imprisoned me, and now you won't even let me die," the young man cried out, on the verge of collapse. "Leo, you can't do this to me. You're always so self-righteously good to me. I don't want this kindness. I'd rather be dead, Leo." I finally managed a smile. "I love you too, Julian." He fell silent, but his tears flowed even more fiercely. As I faded away, it felt like he grabbed my hand, that warmth. It was like the warmth of his embrace on that bone-chilling rainy night when he had rushed through the cold to hold me. Chapter 18. Chris Jensen. Holy shit, I'm seeing ghosts. Chapter 19. Julian knew his time was short. He kept his promise and returned to a normal life, but before he could grow old, the heartache and exhaustion had severely worn down his spirit. On the night of his death, he awoke in a daze. It felt like he had been in a very long dream. He looked down. His hands were young again. A book rested on his lap. The young man's mind was a bit foggy. Oh, he remembered. He had been reading and had unknowingly fallen asleep. It was still raining outside, lightning tearing across the night sky. It was already 9 o'clock. Just then there was a knock on the door. One knock, then another, each one striking his heart. No one should be coming. He thought this instinctively, only to cast it aside the next second. He stood up eagerly. Opening the door, he saw a handsome young man leaning against the doorframe with a half-smile. Familiar features, roguish yet filled with a tender affection, his gaze toward him holding an undisguisable love. I was planning to do something big, but then I received a text from a certain someone. The young man drew out his words, his dark eyes sparkling like fireworks. He waved the phone in his hand, his voice coated in honey. Now who was it that apologized to me, said they liked me very much, told me not to leave, and asked me to sleep with them tonight? The next second, his body moved faster than his mind. He pulled the figure before him into a tight embrace. Warm, soft, tears began to fall uncontrollably. "Whoa, what's this? Crying? I didn't bully you," Leo said, tilting his head. He was surprised and a little flustered to see Julian's tears streaming down. Regretting it, "Want your freedom now?" "No, I want you," Julian said, his voice muffled. The words seemed to catch Leo by surprise. He raised an eyebrow dramatically. Not having an episode today. I'll never have one again. I'll listen to you from now on." "Well, then the late-night snack I brought you wasn't a waste." The young man brandished the bag in his other hand. "All right, let's go inside." "What kind of look is this, hugging in the doorway? I don't hate you. I like you. I love you. I'm sorry, I shouldn't have said those things." With each sentence, the smile on the young man's lips grew wider, and Julian could see that tiny, shy beauty mark appear. "All right, I forgive YMPH." He leaned in reverently and gently kissed the corner of his lips and that endearing mole. Leo froze, looking a bit dazed. After a moment, he came to his senses, his expression complex. "Even if you do this, I'm not letting you go right away. I'm willing to be imprisoned by you forever," Julian said with utmost seriousness. Was this a dream, or had heaven given him another chance? The young man felt the warmth in his arms and closed his eyes. Whichever it was, as long as Leo was here, it was enough. The end.